You're listening to the Clutter Fairy Weekly, a weekly webcast and podcast brought to you by the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas. If you'd like to participate in one of our live webcasts, please visit cfhou.com/weekly. You'll find a calendar of upcoming webcasts, as well as instructions for joining the Zoom meeting via the app or by phone. We'd love to see you. That URL again is cfhou.com/weekly. Now here's the weekly episode. Enjoy.
Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for April 29th, 2025. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, certified professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your comments and questions via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle addresses them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. And we're streaming the webcast live on Facebook, finally, so you can share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. We're going to start by talking about last week's weekly tittle, which was called Assess Yourself. The assignment was to take the initial step of hiring yourself to work as your own professional organizer. I guess we would say, virtually by conducting an assessment of your project or space. I mean, you could do it for real and write yourself checks as well. But
right.
Let's hear from our participants in Zoom and on Facebook who self-assessed this week. Please let us know in the comments. A frequent Zoom participant and commenter who asked to remain anonymous shared her tittle report using the contact form on our website. She answered all of our self-assessment questions, and I'm going to share her answers. What would you like to accomplish? I want to have my paper stuff organized. She spelled it stuff, which I think was the polite way to describe her paper.
Right.
What is the timeline, and is there a deadline? She says, I want it organized by my birthday in mid-September. So she's given herself May, June, July, August, September, about 5 months.
Reasonable deadline.
Who else lives in the space, and are they participating in the project? My husband, he is the distraction.
Right? Often true.
How do you feel about the project? Overwhelmed, confused, unsure how long it will really take? What aspects of the project are you struggling with? Everyday distractions, trying to remember what I actually decided to do about X, Y, Z's. What have been your obstacles so far? Deciding on priorities. What are your first or next priorities to work on? All very important papers. She's capitalized VIP. All very important papers in a quick to reach and find and file place.
That's always a good thing to aim for.
And finally, what times of the week or weekend are you willing to schedule appointments to work on the project? And she says Monday or Thursday mornings if nothing else is scheduled. That's the problem. Those times are my buffer times for things and events that otherwise don't find a time. So what do you think?
I'm going to respond to the part about the scheduling, because if you're trying to move the project forward in time slots that are generally reserved for something else, like you said, it's buffer times for events that don't find a time. And so it sounds like the Monday and Thursday morning is there, but they're often used for something else. So then you're not getting consistent work done on the project. So I think you have to surrender one of those times as a buffer time and make it an organizing time, or you have to find another time that you're willing to surrender some of your free time to work on the project and to do it consistently and not let it get bumped off the calendar by something else. So if you use those appointment times only if something else doesn't come up, you're not going to get very far down the road, and you won't be done by your birthday. So in September. So I think it's important to find a dedicated time that becomes a permanent appointment that you keep with yourself, however long or short that is, and however many iterations over the week that you can do. If you can only do one a week, fine. If you can only do the second Saturday of the month, fine. You just have to pick something that becomes an appointment that you honor and don't bump off for something else. And
Yeah.
that's the only way you're going to make headway.
Yeah. I did
Truly.
like the very clear first priority of getting the very important papers in a quick to reach and find and file place.
Right.
That's a really good clear goal.
And it gives you the probably the that those papers are the ones that you're having the anxiety about. Like, what if I have to have those important papers? How will I find them in an emergency? And so if you can concentrate on locating those papers and putting them all in one place that you can find easily and grab in case of emergency, you will feel less stress. You will definitely relieve some of your own stress around it. And so that's a great thing to, like, you don't have to fix all the paper. You just have to dig through and find the pieces that you think are valuable and centrally locate them. And in some kind of container that is portable, so that if you have to grab it and run out of the house, you can do that. And so you got to grab it to run to the hospital, you got to grab it to run away from the fire, you got to grab it to run away from the hurricane, whatever's happening that's an emergency, you need to be able to grab it and run. And so being able to corral those papers down for yourself, I think will relieve a pressing anxiety that you're feeling right now and allow you to then focus on the stuff that isn't very important papers afterwards. And that's that's a good priority to pick. And I think it will be worth the effort because you'll feel relief.
Yeah. Let's see, other reports coming in. Catherine says weeded areas outdoors and added mulch.
Woohoo. Did the
Um,
same thing.
you did?
I did.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
weeded, my friend came and helped me, and she put out weed killer. Like, she went around, and then I went behind and watered things in, and we did things to corral weeds this weekend.
Nice.
So yeah.
May says organized my dental area and found about 25 new toothbrushes I'll never use. Free from dentists twice per year. Those are a
Right.
great thing to donate to a women's shelter or a family shelter.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Fresh unused toothbrushes. Great idea.
let's see what else. Catherine says, find that to have a to-do list motivates me, and watching those items on my list get crossed out.
Yes, that is very true.
All right. Let's go on to our main topic because we have
Okay,
plenty to talk about, I think.
we do.
Contemporary home design has moved away from dining rooms in favor of open plans, great rooms, breakfast nooks, and other concepts. And our survey supported that conclusion.
Mm.
But some of us still live with formal dining rooms, or at least the furniture that went with them. Today, we're going to explore the changing role of dining rooms and how families incorporate dining room functionality in modern homes and lifestyles.
When Ed proposed this topic, we realized we've never talked about the dining room before by itself. And after all the videos we made, we were kind of shocked that that was true. Once I started to write about the topic, the first thoughts I had around the dining room were about the contents of them. There's a high probability that they're full of inherited stuff, inherited furniture, and then there's the crystal and the china and the silverware that you got it from everybody. These are the things that are passed down as valuable possessions from prior generations, your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents sometimes. And those things that were once valuable are not so valuable anymore, at least not in today's culture. So dining rooms tend to be large rooms filled with old objects that feel like obligations to your ancestors. But as Ed and I talked about it, I realized an emotional truth about dining rooms. In a dining room, the expectation is that a group, a family, a group of friends, etc., will sit down to a meal together and socialize. It's very hard for a group of people to sit at a table and to eat without talking to each other, and it's awkward even. So there's an expectation of a meal with interaction among the diners. Some of you find that rewarding, heartwarming, and a special memory, eating with your family as a kid, celebrating events over a meal together. I know that's how it feels for my family. There's been lots of meals together around the dining table at my dad's house or my sister's house. Others don't like the social aspect as much. Maybe you're an introvert. Maybe dinners at home as a child weren't pleasant for whatever reason. Maybe the social part of the meal at the table together isn't relaxing for you at all. It's easier to watch TV while sitting together than talking around the dining table. Not everyone feels the same about the experience of eating at the dining table as a group. So those interactions affect how the dining room will get used in your house. And if you don't need a room dedicated to social interactions, then you can rearrange how the dining room's used and make it into something else, something that's more useful in your house. If you're happily using the dining room for social meals, then why not review the contents, the furniture, and all the servingware for what really resonates with you and what you've kept just because you inherited it, or kept because you bought it once and now your taste has changed and it doesn't match your aesthetics. So you can enjoy using the dining room and still review the contents. As usual for this topic, we put out a survey. So we're going to go through your responses. And first up is question number one.
Question number one, we asked, which of the following statements describe your living situation with respect to a dining room and dining room furniture? Please check all that apply. We were kind of trying to collect multiple pieces of data there. So we talked about what kind of space do you have in your home for dining, and then also sort of rolled in there some answers about dining room furniture. So the leading answers at 29% each were, my home includes a dining area as part of an open concept design, and my home includes a dining area as part of the living room or great room, which, there's some gray area between those. So that's the lion's share, I think, of our audience.
Yeah.
Second was, my home includes a dining area as part of the kitchen at 21. Or I guess that's third, since we had two
Yeah.
tied
Right.
for
Right.
first.
Yeah.
Fourth was, my home includes a formal dining room that I or we use for multiple purposes, but rarely or never for dining at 18%. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. That's
So,
a lot. Like that's
so
just shy of a fifth.
yeah, 18% of our audience are saddled with a dining room that they hardly ever eat in.
Right.
16% said my home doesn't include a formal dining room. 15% said my home includes a formal dining room that I or we use for multiple purposes, including dining.
Mm-hmm.
And just 5% said my home includes a formal dining room that I or we use exclusively for the purpose of dining. And I maybe, we're not professional survey takers. So our
Right.
surveys are not super scientific. They're much more about getting our audience thinking and talking about
Yeah.
the topic that's coming up. And but I thought that was interesting. So my experience as a kid was that one that's now only 5% of our audience, a formal dining room used exclusively for the purpose of dining,
Right.
which I find that interesting. And I would say, from the experience of eating at friends' houses, that was a more common thing then than it is today. Would you
Mm-hmm.
agree?
I would agree. Yeah.
And would you
Absolutely.
and do you think our audiences breakdown corresponds with what you see in your clients' homes?
I do actually. Yeah. I mean, I can tell that the way that the houses have been built and having open concept designs or great room designs has definitely shifted. The house layouts have definitely shifted towards that. And there's less a separate room that is a dining room that's walled off with, and that's the only purpose for the room. And, if you think about it, you had there's four of you,
Six of us,
pl-
six kids.
six kids so there's
Yeah,
eight of you dining every night.
yeah,
So where else were you guys how else could your mother have possibly fed all of you except you sitting around the dining table? And so there's something about how many people have to sit down every night that impacts the solution as well, right? Like she just couldn't.
yeah,
There's no way you guys could just sort of lay around the house and her provide food for you. It would have been a nightmare for her.
yeah,
So, you guys used it by necessity as well as like It was the current tradition then, but it was also necessary for your mother to manage
Yeah.
the number of people in the house, right? And so feeding four is easier than feeding eight.
Yeah.
And getting four people around in front of the television eating is different than getting eight people somewhere in the
Right.
not in the dining table. And so, um, yeah, I mean, I think,
We'll talk some more about when we get to the relevant question about eating in
mm,
front of the TV,
right.
which in my house growing up, you only did that if you were homesick. The only sick people get to eat in front of the
For the
TV.
TV.
You know, that was the reality then. Um,
uh,
we also add other choices on the list where my home wasn't designed to include a dining area, but I have set up an eating area in the space. That was just 3% of respondents. And then not a lot of response to the bits about dining room furniture. If, you know, not 3% of people said my home doesn't include a dining room, but I have dining room furniture that I use to store items related to dining and entertaining. That's my current situation because we're now in
mm,
an open concept space that I think the architect probably did not intend for people to, you know, set up a dining room. There's
hmm
kind of nothing dining room friendly about it. We have a great big long island that I think is where we're expected to eat, you
mm,
know.
hmm
And then just one respondent answered, my home doesn't include a dining room, but I have dining room furniture that I use to store items unrelated to dining and entertaining.
Ah,
So also very interesting. We aside from those options, we gave people a chance to answer, you know, to check other and then elaborate on that, or to elaborate on the answers they'd given above. And Lee said, one, my husband would like the dining room to be used primarily for dining. Sadly, my paper and other clutter make that impossible. Worse is that the dining room is completely visible from the living room, so my mess in the dining room also causes diminished peacefulness in the living room.
mm,
Two, using the dining room table for sorting mail and reading the newspaper in addition to dining would be acceptable if cleaned up promptly afterward.
okay.
Three, it takes a lot of stuff shuffling to have the dining table available for guests to dine at. This risks the misplacement of bills and other important paperwork.
Mm, okay.
Or I hope that I can use Ed's example of committing to a certain amount of time per week to work on the backlog of paper. Over the past 30 plus years, paper clutter has taken over 2 complete rooms and a significant portion of 2 other rooms.
Wow. So I hear the project parameters, two rooms full of paper and two more rooms partially full of paper, plus the paper that's living in the dining room that's more current. That's a lot of paper to get through. It's not going to be a fast project. You're in for many hours of processing work. But if you've lost the basic use of four rooms already, I think it's time to start the digging out process immediately and to find a better place to handle bills and work on paperwork. If your husband wants to have dinner in there and you don't want to have to risk losing control of your um, current bills and current paperwork by clearing it off when the guests come to stay or to come to eat there, then I think you've made the dining room into an office, and we need to find another place for your office to be, something permanent that is not the dining table. Um, or else we need to create a small portable system that you can work out of and pick up and move easier when it's time to clear the table. I'm guessing that one of the four rooms that is drowning in paper was originally an office,
Or guest
and it's
room, yeah,
yeah,
with an
and it's
area
been
for an
taken
office.
over, right? And so that 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 would be a good place to start, in addition to figuring out how to make the stuff that's on the dining table portable quickly so that you can move it in when you need it or and use the table at night. I would focus on digging out the office first so that you can move back into it and try to shift that functionality off the dining table back somewhere else. Big project. You got a big project in front of you.
Her point, her point number three really struck me, that shuffling stuff off the table to be able to entertain guests jeopardizes, I think we think a lot about how the clutter jeopardizes the primary function of eating, but that the eating also jeopardizes the secondary function of managing your current paper
Yeah,
is
doing
a
her paper
very important
processing.
point that I would sort of encourage, anybody in our audience who's using a table, multitasking their table as both an eating place and a paperwork place, pay attention to how both functions are diminished
Right.
by using the space in
By
that
sharing
shared
it.
way. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, all the more reason to try to relocate it somewhere else so that you don't have to disrupt it. And your husband can have the wish that, he wants to eat at the dining table.
Yeah.
Not unreasonable.
L says, I have a dining room, living room combined and only use that area a couple of times a year. It includes a dining table for six, a matching hutch, and matching chest of drawers inherited from my parents. The living part of this area has a fireplace, which I never use, a couple of curio cabinets with family heirlooms, and a couple of swivel chairs, which can face the fireplace or the windows that look outside. My husband calls this wasted space. I also have a dining nook in the kitchen, which is used for crafts or office type projects.
You're giving the perfect example of the museum to family past that exists in a lot of dining rooms. Inherited furniture, family heirlooms, curios. These are the kinds of things that end up in a dining room that then no one ever uses or looks at. It sounds like a perfect place to truly reimagine its purpose. Why not use that space for something else and get rid of the inherited furniture that creates unused space? It could be an office or a craft room. Imagine it as an empty space, something that is undefined to any purpose, and then start brainstorming how it could be used. Do you really have to keep the dining room furniture because you inherited it? And what about all the inherited china and crystal and silverware that you've got in there being ignored? Surely that stuff is ready to be released now, or at least some portion of it. My point is, the dining room doesn't need to be a museum to previous generations if that's not your interest or your vibe. Don't pass that burden to your children. Release the inherited stuff now for someone else to use and to enjoy to their needs.
An anonymous respondent said, we rarely use the dining room for anything at all, except holiday dinners, and occasionally use the table as a desk for business paperwork. The room goes to waste most days.
It's great that it works for family dinners on holidays. You can also reimagine a space like this. It can be dual purpose, just like a guest room that has two uses. What else could you use the dining room for more often or most of the time that then gets broken down for the holiday meals? It it is a room in the house. You might as well use it for something that you already that you need to do and need to do more often than a few times a year for the holidays. And so if you have to break down something two or three times a year so your family can come over, that's not too much of a burden as long as you create it so it's easy to break down. And in the meantime, you can make better use of the dining room and not have it be isolated over there for three times a year.
Well,
Just a thought.
and you want to make sure that when you break down the ordinary day-to-day functions of the space, that you have good, clear, designated storage so that you don't have to make a mess of it to put it all away.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Our next question was, please complete the following statement. Members of my household and I eat most of our meals blank. And the we offered examples, and one of them I said was, standing at the kitchen sink, and a surprising number of people said that they eat standing in the kitchen. I think, single people, you pull out the thing you're going to eat or, cook or reheat, and you cook or reheat it, and then, there you are. You're not waiting for someone to join you, so you just dig in right there in the kitchen.
Isn't that funny? I've never done that. I know people do it, and I have never thought standing with my food in the kitchen was a good idea. But I do know people do it.
I did it yesterday for a snack, but I think that was partly because reading survey responses had put the idea in my head. It's like, I think I'll eat standing over the kitchen
Let
sink.
me stand in the kitchen sink and catch my crumbs. That's
There
funny.
are those who say that, meals that you eat standing over the kitchen sink have fewer calories. Not sure what the science behind
Oh,
that
is
would
that my
be, but
problem is because I'm
mhm.
not standing while I'm eating?
Oh, there you go. Um,
That's funny.
the the we didn't we did not, since this was an what I call an essay question, inviting
Mm.
people to just share whatever their story is, it's a little hard to tally the total results, but I did a quick scan through, and about a third of respondents said they routinely eat, in front of the television or in front of the computer, like in the living room on TV trays, and so on. And
Mm.
then close to two-thirds said, at a table, either the kitchen table or the dining room table. And then there was, scattering of other responses, including a lot of people who said, well, we do this on weekdays and this on weekends, or I do this, but my husband does this, which I found kind of interesting.
My dad and stepmother are the same way.
Yeah, they have their own
Hmm.
dinner lives.
Yeah, they if nobody's there, they eat either upstairs in front of the television or daddy eats upstairs and she eats in her office.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what triggers which one, but it seems to revolve around Jeopardy. If Jeopardy's on, they both sit upstairs and watch Jeopardy while they eat, and otherwise they eat in two different rooms. It's very fascinating to me. I don't understand it.
Teresa says, my daughter and grandchildren live with me. I usually eat in a recliner watching TV. My daughter and adult grandchildren usually eat in their bedrooms. We rarely eat at the dining room table.
It might seem less relaxing to sit at the dining table to eat. Sitting together at the table creates a space where conversation happens, and it's hard to be at a table with others and eat in silence. So it creates some social pressure to interact with others. Retreating to a recliner in front of the TV or into a bedroom means that the meal is silent without the need for interaction. And this is certainly quieter and less stressful, perhaps. There's no emotional requirements when you eat alone. You don't have to entertain anybody or have make conversation with anybody. So I'm guessing that family members that live together may or may not want to have conversation at the end of the day. So if everybody's been working in at school and they've been interacting all day, you come home from a long day and maybe you just need the silence, right? And so
Yeah.
I get it.
Let me share a couple comments before we go on.
Okay.
Lynn says, formal dining room table used to declutter currently. Hope to sort my many photographs there in the future.
Oh, that's yeah, because we often need a large flat
Yeah.
space to work on, and we don't usually have it unless it's the dining table. So, but that's one of the ways where people get hung up because they start a project and they don't finish the project. And then the dining room becomes a storage for the unfinished project. So you have to be careful that you don't start something that you don't have the capacity to finish. And then you lose control of your dining table as a result. So be careful around that.
Yeah. M says, my formal dining room is also the walk-through to the kitchen. She put formal dining room in quotation
Quotes.
marks. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
It's the
and several people
walkthrough to
chimed
the
in to say
kitchen.
same. I, I'm not sure, in the house I grew up
In
in as a
layout, you mean?
yeah, the house I grew up in as a kid, we came in the front door into a hallway, and the dining room was immediately on the right, and you could go through it to the kitchen, but there was also, you could also just go down the hall to the kitchen. We were
Huh.
sh- we were not supposed to walk through the dining room. The dining room had the nicest rug in the house, probably the only nice rug in the house, honestly,
Right, right, right.
because with six kids, nothing stays nice for very long. And the only household member who routinely walked through the dining room was the dog,
Who did not understand
who
that it was
didn't,
supposed to be off limits
right?
and he was not supposed to shed or track mud on mother's rug.
Summer
That's true.
says, Summer says, and nobody was allowed to sit at the dining room table. It was for holidays and guests only.
Oh, well. Okay, so your mother enforced Stay away from my table. Don't make it dirty. Don't damage it.
Right. But
Okay.
M said ours was used for everything but cleared before supper so meal could be served.
There you go. Again, so mom enforced clearing it off so that dinner
Yeah.
could take place. That's cool. I think lots of kids do homework on the dining table. I mean, as little kids, they need a flat space.
Right.
Although nowadays, so much of it's done on the computer, it may have shifted from back in the
Yeah.
day because now you can sort of have your laptop anywhere working. And so you do homework on the laptop. You're not doing it, you're not messing with a lot of paper. Although I guess little kids probably are still messing with some paper, but anyway.
And Patty commented, not just single people eating at the kitchen counter standing. I am married, but do it occasionally when I'm busy.
Right? Wow. To me, sitting down to eat is a timeout. And so I don't think of it as something to do in a hurry.
Yeah.
Even if I eat in a hurry, I still go sit down somewhere to do it.
Yeah.
We're all different, aren't we?
Yep. Let's see. Returning to where do you eat? Ellen says, I live alone and eat most of my meals in my recliner while on the computer.
And if you live alone and you want to look at the computer while eating, that totally works. So there's no great need to have a dining room then. You don't really need to worry about having a dedicated room to eating. And, maybe you can decide that the dining room could be used for something that's more useful to you.
Or the dining or the space if you don't have a dining room.
Right, the dining space
We kind of concluded that most of our audience
in
doesn't
the
have
open
dining rooms.
area. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lee says members of my household and I eat most of our meals at the table, the counter, in their room, daughter, and sometimes in front of the TV.
So your household sort of does it all. So that sounds like. And so that's great. That means you're getting some use out of the dining room and to have meals as a group. And it says most of our meals at the table. So that's cool. And it's serving your purposes. So then I would what's left for you is to evaluate the contents and decide, is this really the dining room furniture that works for us? Is it really the stuff that we like? Do I need all these, back in the day, you got a dining room and you had to have credenza, like, hutch kind of thing, or some kind of cabinet that was supposed to store all your silverware and serving pieces. And, there's extra furniture that goes with the dining room. And maybe you don't need all that stuff anymore. Maybe you don't need the contents. Maybe you don't need the furniture. So you can review it and see if it's set up that to serve you well or not, and make some changes if it's not working.
Okay, our next survey question was about where you feed guests when you have company for dinner or lunch. Um, so we asked people to complete the following statement. When I want to entertain guests for a meal, we usually eat blank. And and the answers clustered more around, in the formal dining space, if one
Mm-hmm.
exists, whether that's the kitchen or the dining room,
Right.
for guests. Although plenty of people also said, we eat on the deck, we eat around the coffee table, we everyone's on a TV tray, etc.
Right.
Lynn says, I used to have dinner guests in the form of a dinner party, but it was never reciprocated, so I stopped. Now it is just informal meals with one or two friends. The dinner parties were at my dining table. The informal meals are in my living room around a large ottoman.
So you've adapted to the smaller groups, eating in the living room instead. That's great. And then you can reassign the use of the dining room to something else and shuffle the furniture to a new purpose. So let go of what doesn't work in the new purpose. Whatever you want to make that dining room into, whatever furniture doesn't support that, you can let it go, move along. Because it sounds like doing the smaller groups and eating around the ottoman is your new reality and your new paradigm. So that's where you're working from, and that's what you can support. Good job.
Patty says the dining room is our go-to for dinner parties. If we have larger family gatherings, people eat everywhere. The dining room, the kitchen table, the kitchen bar, and on their laps if need be. For hors d'oeuvres or cheese plates we host on the patio, we have only a coffee table set up out there.
Well, it sounds like your dining room's getting used for large gatherings regularly. So your dining room has a purpose that gets used several times a year, and you have other entertaining options that go in other parts of your house, which is great. So you're somebody that's using the dining room for what it was set up to do. So again, just review the contents of the furniture and the objects and see if all that stuff still needs to live with you or not. Is it crowding you? Does it need to be there at all? And you can edit the contents a little bit if you need.
Maureen says when she entertains guests, it's in the family room around a large coffee table.
Okay.
Several people commented that they don't entertain anymore, and I think the pandemic had some impact on that.
Yeah, it
A
did
couple of
shift
people
that, right?
specifically mentioned it. Um, some JM says we entertain in the kitchen breakfast nook at our formal dining set. So they just, used what was built as a breakfast nook as a formal dining space.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if
That
there's anything
works.
else. Any other ones that I want to share? DS says, depending on the number of people, we eat in the kitchen or adjoining dining room.
Yeah, that's the thing. Once the group grows, you got to have chairs for everybody, right? So, and then it becomes an issue. If you're the head of the family and or uh, the head of entertaining for the family, like my sister's chair seats 10.
Uh-huh.
And so, and we have to add another chair to get everybody at the table that usually. So we need a big dining table for everybody to sit down together. But we do that all the time for all kinds of, it's somebody's birthday, it's somebody's the graduation, it's Easter, it's Christmas, it's fill in the blank. And my brother-in-law likes to cook, so he hosts a lot of meals around that dining table. Their dining room gets a lot of use, and we're grateful recipients for all that cooking. So it's awesome, and we like to sit around and talk to each other. So um, for us, that dining room works. At my house, I'm alone. All the relatives are somewhere else, and so I have a dining table and chairs in an open concept room, and I sit at it sometimes for dinner. I sit when my friends come over and we are eating something, but otherwise, I'm one of those in front of the TV persons with the TV tray. So it's the single life, right?
So finally, our last survey question is this was actually a multi-part question just to get
Mm,
people to open up, and the survey results are really fascinating. We got lots of really,
long.
really, really long answers.
Yeah, clearly people had things to say.
So the questions were, what feelings or memories, positive, negative, or in between, does the phrase dining room evoke for you? How have your attitudes, beliefs, or practices around dining and entertaining changed over time? What impact, if any, do dining and entertaining have on the clutter in your space? Becky said, the dining room has always been used to eat. Growing up, we had our meals in the kitchen and ate meals in the dining room on special occasions. It was, she said eight, but I'm wondering if that, eight, the number, but I'm wondering if that was
Yeah, yeah.
by
She meant
voice and she meant
ATE. Yeah,
ATE. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, it was never cluttered. I love having people over, and when I downsized, it was very important that I had a dining area in which we could all be around the table eating family style. I moved about 4 months ago, and I've had people over an average of once a week. It is getting used, and it gives me joy.
So you enjoy the social aspect of dining and you're making it happen once a week now, and that's really great. So exactly the use it's designed for, and you're getting the, benefit and the reward of interacting with your friends once a week, which is great. Good for you.
Gracie says, positive vibe, happy childhood memories. My dining room is partially open concept, and the space has lots of natural light. I've struggled with the pile of bills and work backpacks that I so easily dump on the dining room table. But I've recently developed a workable system that keeps this area organized for working from home and mostly clutter-free.
So along with the happy childhood memories, you converted the dining room to a work from home space. So it's now being used as a home office instead of a dining room mostly. And that's a valid conversion to a new use of the space, and it works for you, and you figured out how to make it be clutter free, and that's awesome. And if you are living alone and coming home and using that as a work from home space, then you can make dining happen somewhere else, and that can be your new home office. And great, good job.
Kathy says, I never had a dining room growing up. So when we bought our house, which had a dining room, I guess my feeling was I'm supposed to entertain. Turns out I don't enjoy cooking for or entertaining others. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't buy a dining room table. I would make the dining room a library.
Oh, there you go. Well, you can do it all over again. You own the house, you own the furniture, you can do it different. So if you want to make it into a library, then, maybe the table is the central place where people sit and read, or maybe the table goes out and you replace it with, chairs and end tables or some other way that you want the library to be used. I mean, there might be a purpose for a table in a library if you're going to come and sit in there and like look things up, or
Or
maybe you want to write while you're
yeah, maybe
there,
you're a note taker when you're
or
reading. Yeah.
journaling or anything like that. If there's any kind of studying going on, you're doing any kind of research. So, but you can certainly, I, I agree with you about that. I find entertaining very stressful instead of fun. Ed finds it fun and he is happy to do it. I find it super stressful to do. And so I've always been one who attends these events. I love being there for them, but I do not like being in charge of making them happen. I find that super stressful. And so I wouldn't have taken an empty formal dining room and filled it up with dining stuff for the purpose of entertaining others, because it would never happen at my house. So that's how it works. And you got to develop, like, don't assume that because it's just somebody wrote dining room on the architectural plan, that's where you have to make a dining room. It's just another room in the house. So reimagine it how you want it and make it what's going to work for you. Totally agree with you about that. Just make it happen.
Cece says dining room table at home as a kid was used just for holidays with special tableware. Pleasant memories. Ate at table and kitchen otherwise. Current apartment is small and I don't entertain. I'm a senior citizen and have no interest in or energy for entertaining people other than my adult kids. I'm very informal. Dining room table used for crafts.
There you go. Lots of dining rooms get converted to craft rooms. So I think that at this stage of your life where your adult kids are coming over and they're probably helping you, if they're going to be there and you guys are going to eat together or do something there together, then you guys are doing it. Your kids are participating. And so why not let it be your craft room and set it up like that? And you guys can figure out another way to eat when they come over. That makes perfect sense.
So here's a counterpoint. Selena says, it feels like a separate area just for a table and chairs where you have to sit straight and use fork and knife. It's overrated. Eating alone or with someone in front of a laptop while watching a movie is so much better.
So it sounds like you don't see it as a relaxing place and a little bit overwhelming. You're more relaxed watching a movie with someone, so you're sharing the space without needing to interact. So a dining room just doesn't work for you, and you can make it something else. I mean, as you've described it, you're rejecting the social interaction part of being at the dining table, having to sit up and use a fork and knife and be there talking to people. So if that is not fun for you, then you don't need to have a dining room set up that way. You're a perfect candidate for reclaiming it and making it be something else that works for you. 100%.
So let me share some comments. M says, I don't see how people eat a balanced meal if they are not at a table. How do you balance a salad, cut the food, not spill the soup? And she goes on to say, so I'm now wondering if not sitting down at the table with place settings is part of the reason Americans are overweight from an unbalanced diet designed for eating with one hand.
Interesting. There is certainly that convenience factor that has to be impacting that aspect of dining. That if it's convenient to eat at the TV tray, or if it's convenient to eat standing up in the kitchen, it's probably not. It's probably not home cooked food. It's probably something else. And so, fair point.
There are a lot of complexities in this topic because
Mm.
you know TV has become so much more, when we were kids, there were three channels of nothing on, and now there are hundreds of channels and cable and streaming and
And a computer screen and a phone screen.
right and games to play and
Yeah,
a
all
thousand other things.
distracting.
And I think, I do think there's also some, uh, I think there's some research suggesting that eating in front of the TV, watching a YouTube, whatever, it's eating in front of a screen,
Yes.
it's easier to overeat because you are in this sort of mode of passive consumption. You're having entertainment or information just sort of poured into you, and it's very easy to eat absent-mindedly and thereby eat too much.
And you also can't, if you're watching in that way, then you're never interrupted from eating to talk.
Right.
When you're sitting at a dining table, you have to put the fork down some to have conversation,
Yeah.
and you don't eat as fast. I think that we sitting alone at the TV tray with the TV or the screen means that you can eat faster,
Right.
and so you don't get your I'm full signal in the same way as if you're sitting at the table and being, more relaxed and slow around
Yeah.
eating.
Well, and
Yeah, I
also
can see that.
I think those of us who grew up eating always seated at a table, that was also kind of the focus of etiquette training. Most
Oh,
of
right.
most of the manners that we learned as kids were related to eating. You don't talk
Yeah,
with your mouth full, and um, just various things about how you handle how you handle, no elbows on the table.
right.
Lynn's holding up a napkin. You got to have your napkin.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And you got to use the right fork.
Let me share some more comments. Naomi says, when I was living with roommates in my 20s, I remember that I would examine furniture catalogs. I felt that acquiring a dining room hutch would be the transition to full adulthood.
Oh, that was the symbol of being a grown up, huh? There you go.
Naomi also said, I'm shocked at the idea that people who live together are retreating to eat separately.
Mm.
I find that interesting too, because Jaime and I almost always eat together, not 100% of the time. Like if I'm, in the middle of a work day, he'll feed himself lunch and let me
Yeah, yeah,
fend for
yeah.
myself. But that's
Yeah.
because I'm, following my own schedule,
Right, right, right.
you
Around
know.
work. But it's interesting to me when there's several generations like that. Like if you think about what it's like to be a teenager and you so don't want to talk to your parents or grandparents, like the idea of, sharing personal things, what happened at school, what you and your friends are talking about, like that is the stuff that the parents drag out of you against your will when you're a teenager. And so the idea of, oh my God, I have to avoid sitting at this meal where my parents and grandparents are going to go, so how was your day? And then expect me to answer it. Like I can see why teenagers retreat away from that because given the option, like you said, it wasn't an option at your house, but I think that, for other people, if they have the option and they're young, they're going to run from the adults like really hard. And so that doesn't surprise me. And I guess once some people retreat, then it seems less likely that the rest of them are going to stay at the table.
Right,
So, yeah, they're kind of setting a parameter there. But I think that's not everybody is dealing with, like you and Jaime are the same, generally the same, you're adults, nobody's a kid.
right,
And the places where we've seen them retreating have involved, grandma, daughter, grandkids. And so there's
right.
several
Often,
age levels there. And
yeah, or adult children. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Dawn says we host 10 to 12 regularly for holidays. Our kitchen table seats 8 comfortably, and it's tight with guests. No formal dining room. Every day, my dear mother-in-law has a puzzle board on half of it that we move for holiday meals.
Oh, there you go. She's working puzzles every day. Well, that's cool. So, she's using it as a desk space, which is comfortable for her, I'm sure. And then, it's on a board so it can be moved. So that's great. You guys worked it out.
Well, she goes on to say, hubby always prefers to eat in the living room in front of TV, so I usually join him, but I'd prefer to eat at the table if it were clear.
Right?
Kids are grown now, but when they were younger, I would sometimes use the clear half for family meals. Often we just let them eat at the coffee table in the living room with us. Not my preference, but at least we always ate together.
Well, yeah, that's something that's really nice. Well, and it's, While I was visiting just last week, my dad at one point said, I would like to eat at the dining table. And I think that my stepmother was kind of surprised. So we had a couple meals while I was there because I was there where we went and sat at the dining table to eat dinner. And it meant that we sat there and talked to each other. And I think that was part of what he wanted. Like he's a super introvert, but when I'm there, he wants to interact some. And so that's what we did. And it was fine by me. I don't mind talking to them. So we had a great time. But I think it was unusual for them. It's something that he asked for special because there was somebody in the house.
Oh, good one from M. M said, also, we had to ask to be excused from the table.
Oh, remember that.
Yeah, we
I
did
remember
too.
that.
May I please be excused? You could not leave the
Right.
table until you said the invoked those words.
Like there was no running away. I'm not sure how strong that holds nowadays.
Yeah,
That was some old school manners that reflects our age. We're dating ourselves a little bit, guys.
just a little. No, it's a really interesting topic, and so
Surprisingly so. Like I didn't expect where it turned when we started talking about it. I was like, "Oh, this is way more than just you inherited all the crystal and the china in the dining room. That there's a lot more going on here."
another great comment from M. M is on fire today. M says, some nutritionists remark about mindful eating in quotation mark,
Right, right,
which
right.
involves small bites, thorough chewing, and an awareness of the food. This enhances good digestion. I went to a mindful eating seminar some years back at Nia Moves in Houston.
Oh, right, right,
I'm
yeah.
not sure if Nia is still
Yeah, yeah, it's still
are they
happening or
still in
not.
business? Yeah.
I don't know.
But anyway, it was a center that did Nia, which was a form of movement exercise thing, and they also had yoga and related things, and they did these seminars, and it was all about choosing your food mindfully and then eating mindfully without just without distraction was a big part of it,
Hmm.
so that you give yourself time to get, part of it is giving yourself time to get full.
Yeah, and for that signal to come back and for you to register.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I think
Uh,
because of our time, I think we have to go to the tittle.
well, yeah, we started really late though, so I was
Oh,
gonna
okay,
let
okay,
us run over a little bit. Yeah,
okay.
we should move on. And let me also mention We will be back next week at the usual time. That's Tuesday, May 6th at noon U.S. Central Time. The topic is going to be something in the area of emotions, because that's what's on our schedule. We haven't, Gail and I have not yet nailed down the specifics, but it's going to be about emotion, habits, and how they impact our clutter and efforts to organize. So watch your email for an announcement. Gail, go ahead and give us the title.
This week's tittle, a peaceful table. This week's assignment is to look for ways to make the experience of eating meals or feeding guests in your home more enjoyable. Whether you eat your meals or entertain visitors in the dining room, kitchen, on the deck, gathered around a coffee table, or sitting in front of the TV, we'd like you to consider ways in which clutter or a lack of organization adversely affects the experience for you and your family. Reflect on these questions. What feeling or mood would you like to cultivate for your eating space? Is any clutter visible from the place where you eat? And does it detract from your enjoyment of the meals? Does your eating space share functions with other activities? Could you relocate any of those activities elsewhere so that they're not part of the dining area? If you eat in a space that's shared with other activities, what could you do to make it faster and easier to clear away the materials when you're ready to eat? And what other changes to your living space could make dining and entertaining more satisfying and relaxing? So we're asking you to look at how it functions, how you use the space, and how you can improve it, so that wherever you eat works for you as a family. And come back and tell us about it next week. We'll be ready to hear.
We went down a lot of rabbit holes today because the survey responses, brought up a lot of
We're so
interesting stuff
rich. Yeah, yeah. They were
about
very thorough.
food and eating and the changes to our lives and our world in recent generations. But we
Hmm.
wanted to bring it back around to the topic of clutter, at least with the tittle.
Right?
All right.
Exactly.
If you're watching this on YouTube, we would love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook, or join our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from you, so please keep your questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere that you find us. You can always reach us through the website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thanks everybody for joining us. It was a fun topic for us to explore today. I hope you got something out of it, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.